I wanted to talk about and share what I found after learning all these different Taoist practices, what I would say, and Tantra as well, I'm going to add here, what I would say I would call like the number one sex tip, yeah, that anyone can start using and implementing in their life for like basically better sex. And it works just as well for self-pleasuring, one-on-one sex, solo sex, as it does for sex with a partner, right, as well. So guys, I just want to check you can hear me, that you're with me. Please give me a 5 in the chat if the sound quality is okay and everything's fine. And I'm just going to go put a plant in front of the door so it doesn't go and knock and bang while I'm so I have to check on my other phone to see if I'm getting 5s and if people have got me. Okay. So, okay, people can hear me. That's really fantastic. Okay, so I can go on and on this topic. Last live I went on for an hour. I'm not necessarily opposed to going on for an hour. It's just coming off that phone there as well. Sorry, I could only see the comments on this other phone. It's weird how this works. But first of all, any questions coming up while I'm talking, just type them in the chat and I'm going to go over them at the end. Okay, so now starting and coming up with, I just want to introduce this topic because if I just give you the answer right now, this whole live is going to be like really boring, basically. Okay, so someone called Simon, who's been doing Taoism for 30 years and studied with Mantak Chia and everything, made a really good comment and a really good point on one of my posts, right? So you guys probably saw my post where I talked about, oh my God, Makita! Sorry, my dog. Come here. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so I made a post where I was basically writing about men, you know, waiting to the point where the woman really wants sex and then holding off, right? Okay. Now, some people got what I was saying, some people didn't. I don't think that if you didn't get it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are less knowledgeable or less intuitive or anything like that. I think to be critical of this point, definitely, you know, when you write 1 or 2 sentences on Facebook, that's 1 or 2 sentences about something you could write an entire book about. So the people that were critical or didn't agree with or like or resonate with what I wrote, yeah, it's definitely understandable why they, you know, had this criticism, right, of it. Okay. And Simon, right, and Simon has been practicing Taoism for many years. 1 second. Makita, come here. Simon has been practicing Taoism for many years, and when you start getting into Taoist sex, one thing you discover is like it's super nerdy, right? You know, like if I just go into like one of the styles of Taoist sex, you know, where you use this thing called shallow penetration, right? The idea is that Taoist men massage their penises to make the head, you know, nice and big like a mushroom, so that it can really stimulate the G-spot very well, and then does this thing called shallow penetration, which means slowly putting the head in and out, which if you get it right and you've cultivated the energy to be able to actually do this practice, it's really amazing. And you do it like 9 shallow, 1 deep. Okay, 9 shallow, 1 deep, right? So there's all this counting, right? You know, I'll say 9 shallow, 1 deep works way better than 8 shallow, 1 deep, or 8 shallow, 2 deep. I don't know why it is. The numbers work for some reason, but obviously you're trying to have sex, you're trying to count all these numbers up to 36 and 72 and God knows what. Yeah, it's really like nerdy. And he definitely had a good point. Like, it needs to be playful. And the thing is, you know, when you start learning this technical Taoist, how to move your sexual energy up your body and circulate it and all this and that, you know, initially it all seems really like just really nerdy, you know. Makita, it can, you know, on the one hand, when you're cultivating the energy, it feels amazing and you start getting a better feeling than you ever got before about sex. you know. On the other hand, right, that nerdiness, it can get like it can get a little bit much. And the thing is, playfulness is part of Taoism, but it's a little bit like you need to go through this stage of getting the nerdy side of it. You know, it's like you need to learn your times tables, and then you don't need to look at the times table anymore, and you can just get it all. You know, whatever, someone can go 8 times 8, and you're like, ah, yeah, and you know exactly what it is, which I don't even remember what it is, right? Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, it's a little bit like that. So once you've done a certain amount of practice, that you've got the energy cultivation, it's really, really important to then start being playful with the sex, because if you're not being playful, you're completely missing the point of it. Okay, now in Taoism, one of the main purposes of any kind of a sexual practice is to reverse aging and achieve immortality. Okay, right? I'm just curious, who is surprised I just said that? Give me a 1 in the chat if you're surprised that I just said that. And I'm just here having a look, and I just want to see who said. Anyone. If this surprised you, say 1, yeah? If it not surprise you, please give me a 2, okay? See if anybody's... I told you it was windy. Oh, and I need to do that up tighter, so that's why that happened. Okay, give me, please. Oh, what's happening here? Oh, there we go. Okay, give me, please, a 2, a 1. Okay, someone was surprised. 2 people were not surprised. Okay, all right, okay. So, yes, okay, how does that work, right? Bizarre. Okay, not really, because when you actually bear in mind that we are all created out of orgasmic energy, okay, we're created out of an orgasm. And it's funny because when I think about this, I think about how as a kid, right, my mom and dad were all like, okay, you know, you weren't supposed to talk anything about sex. Babies got dropped down the chimney by storks. Yeah, that was literally what we were told. And I remember as well being a little kid and trying to draw this picture of God, and I remember people being just like, oh, you drew a picture of God, oh my God, you've like blasphemed. And it was like the same thing that even when I asked, what does God look like, what is God, who is he and all this, no, nobody would tell me, nobody could talk about it. And the same thing when I'm saying like, where do babies come from, what's sex all about, no answer, right? Because it's one and the same thing. The creator is sexual energy, right? And we're created. Imagine that sperm and egg can come together and it can literally create this new life. And in the same way, if we learn to channel and bring this energy up into the body, we can start to rejuvenate our body at the cellular level, rejuvenate the body and the glands, and it literally reverses aging. Oh, I just had a little message from a client which made me tickled pink. I'm going to read it word for word so that I'm not, I'm not going to be accused of any falsehoods or whatever. So he says, hi, Jade. Just to let you know, my Chinese medicine doctor said I have the pulse and health of a professional athlete, and I attribute most of that to your course. Yeah. Okay. A couple of days ago, just this last week, another one of my clients who's an old guy who had been, as happens with many men in our culture, when they start getting older, the erection stops working so good and the sexual energy isn't there so much anymore. And he's like, wow, I'm feeling it coming back like when I was a teenager again, literally after like a few weeks of working together, before we even started to directly address his sexual energy, you know. And it's amazing how through these practices, you know, I felt like when I started them in the first 6 months, it was like my aging went back by about, I suddenly was like 10 years younger all of a sudden, you know. And like when you look at people doing these practices, and the whole idea is we're healing the body and becoming ageless. Right now, come on, if you want to reverse aging and be ageless, okay, there's a nerdy aspect to it of bringing the sexual energy up into the organs, the glands, the cells, and so on and so forth. But what better way to be youthful than connect with the energy of youthfulness? And sexual energy, it is a youthful energy. And I know, like, this is a taboo thing to say because we have all pedophilia and everything in our culture, but pedophilia is exactly the result because people are not connected in with the innocence of their own sexual energy. They've bought into this crazy over-sexualized idea of sex disconnected from love and disconnected from soul and disconnected from purpose. And they're desperate, their soul is desperately calling for them to go back to that. So then they end up playing it out in like kind of like perverted ways, which is really unfortunate and really harmful for a lot of people. So, okay, right. Now, I'm going to get a little bit nerdy before I tell you what this secret is, but I'm really curious, okay, about, let me just check here. I'm really curious about if anybody here can guess what the secret is, right? Type it in the chat if you can guess, and I'm going to tell you in not very long time, okay? And then I'll open up for any questions about this, right? Now, in Taoism, we talk about these words like transmutation, alchemy, and transformation, transmutation, alchemy. So all kind of like the same process that we're talking about. Now, if you look at the body from the Taoist perspective, the body is an alchemical chamber according to Taoism. So we are spirit beings that come from a spirit dimension, and we come here into the physical dimension in order to experience life. And if you look at the one going up the center, right, on the men it goes from the prostate up into the heart and up into the center of the brain. With the women, it's kind of going through the cervix, up into the heart and up into the center of the brain. And as the energy moves up through these meridians, it goes through these 3 transformation centers. Now, I'm going to just put this in a very basic language, which is kind of easy for anyone to understand, which is, imagine this, okay? The energy arises, and you probably most often feel this energy as the horny feeling. That's probably the most recognizable way that you feel that energy, okay? Now, number 1, we want the energy to rise up into our belly, where it transforms into feelings of vitality, okay? By transforming in this energy center into chi, okay? So, this is the number one first place the energy needs to transform. And unfortunately, the fact is that in our culture, most people are not even having a decent amount of transformation going on within that transformation center. The problem being, the reason being, that we are taught from a young age to repress our sexuality, which literally means tensing, okay, and keeping the sexual energy down in the genitals, which is why there's like a lot of people like masturbating and needing to ejaculate a lot in terms of men. In terms of women, it's why many women struggle with orgasm, because the sexual energy is blocked in the genitals, okay? Now, this is the first transformation center, or we can call it a dantian, okay? Then the energy rises up into the heart, and it transforms from qi into an energy that we call shen. Okay, so the Shen energy, we can say it's kind of like when we're feeling love, that's kind of Shen energy, okay? Now, when we look at healthy sexuality in terms of the Taoist understanding of healthy sexuality, we talk about having 50% orgasmic energy and 50% love. So in other words, we want the orgasmic energy coming up and the love going down, and we want to be creating a connection between the two. If you imagine love energy as red, orgasmic energy is blue, we want them to be coming up and down and transmuting and transforming purple color, right? That's why I'm wearing purple. I thought I'd wear purple for this, with a Fibonacci sequence to represent the golden ratio. So, this is what the Taoists call a healthy sexuality, okay? Now, once this energy is nicely transforming in the heart, it then rises up into the center of the brain. We call it in Taoism the crystal palace. It's kind of like the third eye. And that's when the consciousness opens and we can experience kind of enlightenment and spiritual connection. And, you know, we get this, well, actually, when the heart is activating, that's when people get this nice shine and glow in their eyes, which we call Shen, as well as the Shen, you know, in the heart and in the spirit, right? Okay, so if we look at this process in two ways, and we look at the lower Dantian giving us Qi, the middle one giving us Shen, the upper one giving us this Tao enlightenment energy, okay? And then we look at the red energy center in the heart, the blue in the sexual center where the womb is on the woman, and these two energies going up and down. So these are both kind of working at the same time, if that makes sense. And to keep us healthy, to feed our creativity, to give us so many things we need in life, we need that sexual energy to be moving up into our heart and transforming. So when we're getting all these different symptoms like pain in the genitals, different kinds of sexual problems, problems with our health, with our inspiration, money problems are really, really connected in with this as well. Whether that be we're not making enough money or we're making money but we don't feel like it's aligned with our soul purpose. And if we're going to look at this in another way, you know, and it's all well and good to have all this technical understanding about this that I'm talking about, but most people aren't going to get this technical understanding. Fortunately, the way nature created us, we don't really need this technical understanding, okay? Now, for us people living in the Western world, to get the most out of it, I think you're not really going to get the most out of it without understanding this, okay, this stuff. The reason I say that is because we are programmed in a way that takes us completely away from our original programming. I mean, one of my huge criticisms about so-called modern sexual liberation is that basically love has just got completely sacrificed on the altar of sexual liberation, right? You know, it's all about having polyamorous, loads of different partners. Every other person now in America certainly is talking about opening up their relationship. I'm talking to people obsessed with having sex with multiple partners. You know, there's all this, you know, not that any of these things are wrong in and of themselves, right? This whole thing of sex toys, porn is massive, more use of the internet for porn than anything else. And they're even creating these AI sex dolls. The thing about all this stuff is externalizing sexuality, which sometimes is okay to externalize sexuality if we have a really good relationship with internalized sexuality, which most people just don't. Now, okay. This is for us, this applies to us, but if you take like some person, right, living in the jungle, no, it doesn't read or write, doesn't have so-called civilization, meaning they're probably a lot more civilized than we are, right? You know, and you look at nature and how these people experience, you know, connection and reproduction. Let's say what's the process of reproduction is that, you know, we are biologically wired in a way that has allowed our ancestors to survive with a very, very, a very simple way of life, right? Meaning that people would pair bond generally for life, okay? And what brought people together? Number one, connection and love, yeah. Number two, sex then happened based on this love. So you had this 50% love, 50% sexual energy, and people then at that time, they had the time and the space for love. They didn't, it wasn't like today where if you are feeling love, suddenly you can be called codependent or needy or all these different names, attachment styles and so on. I mean, I feel like all this, you know, whilst understanding it to some extent can be useful, at the same time, it's completely missing the point that we as humans are designed to connect in a certain way, to pair bond and to create families, and that when we're not doing this, what actually happens is it affects people so negatively. It literally takes years, if not decades, off of people's lifespan if they're not experiencing love, right? So what is that secret ingredient? Come on, we all feel horny. It's very, very rare to meet a person who never feels horny. We all feel horny. We have that energy, and that energy is strong because it's our life force. But the world for a very, very long time has been shutting down love. And this is what I'm talking about, actually, right? I could have just said it's love and not talked anymore, right? Okay, but the secret ingredient I'm talking about is love. And what is love all about? Because you can go, oh, love, oh, I'm going to just buy a heart-shaped red box of chocolates and a bunch of roses, and that's love, right? Okay, that's not love. And we talk about love as being a lot of different things, you know, and obviously different people show love in different ways. Different people want to experience love in different ways, but what we're talking about with love is an energy in the heart. Number one, that obviously it starts with self-love. So if we're not experiencing self-love, which means a powerful, strong electromagnetic field to our heart, essentially, we're going to have a very hard time sharing, you know, love with other people. When we're shut down to love, for example, what happened? Okay, we might get sexually shut down. We could very easily find, and this is what's happening to many, many young people, especially under the influence of porn culture, because porn does exactly the same thing that religious sexual repression did. Religious sexual repression demonized sex and cut sex off from love, right? You know how even still to this day, people will talk about marriages break up because the love disappeared. It's rubbish. The love didn't disappear. The sex disappeared, right? So many divorces are happening because the sex isn't right, you know, and people are like, oh, it's all about love. Look at the love. I'm not saying love isn't important, but it's sex as the physical manifestation of love. That's what's going wrong in these relationships, because the sexual energy is not connecting up to the love. And basically, people don't understand how to use sexual energy, and they don't understand the techniques, you know? Now, when we have that nice open magnetic field to the heart, electromagnetic field to the heart, it draws the sexual energy up. And this basically makes us healthy people. And this is what happened to our ancestors. Even if you go today, like into the middle of the jungle in Venezuela, you will find people that just walk around naked. They have no rules or morals about sex, yet nobody in their tribe is getting like sexually assaulted. People are pair bonding for life. People have like very, very healthy sexuality, unlike in our culture. Partly because nobody tells them sexuality is shameful, but they're just going along the way people have done for hundreds and thousands of years that worked perfectly fine before, you know, missionaries went in and started telling most of the people in South America to have like a bad relationship with their sexuality. So just through the experience of love, we can have like a big experience of the alchemy process, right? Now, I mean, we do all kind of experience love, but what happens is usually we kind of experience it a bit and then it all shuts down. Now, why is this happening? So, number one, most people, and especially males, have an energy block just below their heart that is basically a fear of love. And this develops due to lack of physical love and physical attention and other processes, but this normally develops around 1 year and younger, or 1 year, 1 year and younger, basically, because of the mother not physically touching the child enough. So actually, if you look in these tribes, the children are literally held and hugged by the mother for like pretty much the first 9 months to a year of their lives, during which time they develop like a healthy psyche, basically. So it's not surprising to see so many men today with issues around trusting women, because their first experience with a woman, with their mother, was that the mother constantly was betraying their need for love, right? So this is a big, big issue. There's all kinds of other blocks we can get. There's a block that tends to be around the pubic bone, which is shame around sexuality. Very often those two are together. And then there's any other number of blocks that we can actually be getting, like inside of our abdomen as well, which stop us from experiencing love. Now, I will just say, when I do work with clients around this, before working with sexual energy, it's usually like pretty important to actually go in and deprogram and declutter and remove and get out literally those energy blocks, right? Because you can go to and sit with a psychologist for 5 years, 10 years, and try to talk about and remember when your mom didn't hug you as a kid. You're not even going to remember it. You're not really going to understand about, I mean, even if you mentally understand the trauma, it's unlikely even to unblock it, you know. I mean, a friend of mine was talking about how she had spent like 10,000 euros trying to have this therapy while she was pregnant, and still was just feeling, you know, really, really bad about stuff, like really, really bad. And, you know, because it's not addressing the actual energy block. When we start hacking and going into the energy field, is absolutely incredible what we can start to do. Now, for those watching, whether you're watching now, whether you're watching the replay, I just want to let you know I have a really, really beautiful, cool training. It's like a video training about this self-love. So if you do want this training, please just drop in the chat right now, training. Now, I notice self-love is key. Marta has typed in, basically that's it, right? Love, self-love. Self-love and love is the same thing, you know. And I love that answer, right? And I've just got here the whole questions, and I'm curious, does anyone here have any questions about this? Does it tell me who all is watching? Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone even want to jump on the live with me? So, oh, now I'm seeing typed here the questions all of a sudden. I don't know why it does this, it's so annoying. So, guys, sorry about the chaos and having to run after the dogs and everything. I kind of spent the whole day out, and I think they're pissed off at me now. I've just come back. Yeah, can I say more about the betrayal of need for love at age 1 or lower? Yeah, I mean, just to give you a name of a resource, a book that I recommend every single person in the whole entire world should read. It's called The Continuum Concept. It's an amazing, amazing book. I cannot overrate how much it changed my life when I read it. It was kind of a little bit shocking, but, you know, such an important resource. So, well, okay. What she talks about is kind of like attachment theory as well. You know, when a child is born, right, what are they programmed to do? You know, they're programmed to hug mum, to suck on mum's boobies, and basically to just feel hugged and feel loved, right? You know, because the brain, it cannot do a lot at that point. That said, I mean, I will say I spoke to my daughter like she was a very intelligent person from a young age. I definitely advocate speaking to very young children as intelligent beings, yet we need to understand their capacity is to love. At such a young age, they want to hug, they want to suck on boobies, right? And they want to have physical connection and physical love, right? Now, when we look at this like sex negative society that's all scared of intimacy and scared of love and scared of affection and scared that if you're going to love your kid too much, you're going to be a pedophile, or God knows what people are scared of, you know. There's a whole thing of like, oh, make the boy tough by, you know, letting him scream on his own and everything. So, you know, if you leave a baby screaming on its own for, say, 5 minutes, okay, that baby has no concept that I'm going to be screaming for 5 minutes and in 5 minutes it's going to be okay. Okay, it's like that baby is in a eternity screaming and screaming and screaming, and it's like the most horrific feeling that just feels like forever. Yeah, this is apparently how a baby experiences it, and it's just awful for them. They just absolutely... It's so traumatic, yeah, for them to be left to scream on their own. And imagine if you look at children's books from times when probably a lot of us were growing up, that's exactly what parents were being told to do. Even, for example, if you're feeding your baby on a schedule, even that is traumatic for the baby, because when the baby needs to suck on the boob, it needs to suck on the boob, and if it's not getting it and it's screaming, you know, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of what we're being taught, or certainly in the past have been taught to do with kids, is really traumatizing them at a young age. I mean, with my daughter, I remember the first time she cried, she was about 2 weeks old, and we were in a car, we were driving in a car, and we put her in the child seat, and she started screaming. And I remember, for me as a mother, this was literally the most horrific sound I ever could have heard, right? And there was no way I could actually allow myself to hear that sound. I stopped the car and took her immediately and put her on my lap, and I know that that is dangerous, and you know, people aren't supposed to do that, and so on and so forth. But you know, I'm gonna say I have a kid now who I never disciplined, I never have disciplined, but if I say to her, and she's a wild kid, she's like me, she's a wild kid, right? You know, but if I say to her, you know, I want you to do something, maybe she'll moan for a second, but she listens to me, and she's actually, you know, we can't expect a kid to be perfect, but at times she's been being a little naughty, and I'm like, Nina, why aren't you being good? And she's actually gone, Mummy, I want to be good, yeah? You know, like what so many people describe, like someone was describing on one of my posts not long ago about children, oh, the children are just using anger to, you know, try to get their way, and that children shouldn't be allowed to get their way, and things like this. And children, if you tell them to stop playing with their toys, they just start screaming and getting angry. And I'm like, well, I don't know, my kid didn't do that, and I don't think a kid doing that is a sign of like a functional child. I think it's a sign of a traumatized child, and simply just the way that we are raising children conventionally in society traumatizes children, and it stops them developing healthy sexuality. And when you look at that happens, right, then they start, because it's blocking their sexual energy, and they want to start touching the genitals, and basically then it's building up a lot of pressure in the genitals. So of course they start masturbating, and the next thing, porn is there. You know, it's all kind of like, it's, you know, whether it be, as you call it, malice or you know, incompetence, I suppose is the word. It's like the kid is traumatized by a lack of love, you know, then it's traumatized by having its sexuality repressed, and then the next thing is just in there having the pornography, you know, and it just sets everybody up into this like really toxic experience of sexuality. So yeah, children are programmed to love, just like dogs are programmed to love, even though the dogs are a bit naughty sometimes. Bad doggies. Come say hello, Spice. How can you really hold it against them when they're so cute, right? So, are there any last further questions before I finish this live? And if you're watching on the replay, you have a question, do like tag me and ask me what the question is. Yeah, again, I don't know why this kid didn't come up properly in the group in the way that I had expected it to, but yeah, and if you want that training that is about self-love, do just put training in the chat or message me privately to find it. So wishing you a beautiful, wonderful, joyful end of your week. Bye bye.